Hey Richard, all right, I'll take a look. And what you have here are the issues. Issue number one, Duncan's not opening. You know, I'll handle some of these together and some of them separately. Duncan's not opening usually has to do with fish nipping on them. There are water quality issues that can cause that as well, and there's even disease issues, even though if I had to pick a coral that was least likely to get sick, Duncan would be high on that list. But there are times when Duncans get bacterial issues where they don't open up. Another thing that will cause them not to open as well, I will mention in a little bit, and we've already talked before I was looking at this. There are some trace element issues that can affect them. But the first, if the first question was, hey, my Duncans aren't opening, I would probably be thinking of fish. I just thought I'd mention it since we're talking generically, if a hobbyist presented these questions to me. Okay, so SPS corals bleaching, that's Montes. When you say digis, that's Acropora digitata or Montipora digitata? Montipora digitata. So Montes are bleaching, basically. And then polyp bailouts on Euphilia, torch corals. That's a trickier one to kind of tie all of this together. There may be some connection, or these may be individual separate problems. Montes bleaching can be caused by two things generally. One is the lack of manganese, as I had mentioned to you when we were talking about this. So you've already told me that you're not dosing manganese and iron, which you should be. Even if you never needed to before, they are important for corals. Another thing that can cause bleaching in Montes is an improper nutrient balance, nitrogen and phosphorus ratios. And that's something that maybe you want to do a little interview with Charles Delbert, because he's been exploring that with the Steinhardt system. He had seen issues like that, and by manipulating the ratios, the molar concentration of phosphorus and nitrogen as nitrate, that had a very observable effect on the pigmentation in Montipora corals. Why that's the case, I don't know, but it's something that can be replicated. So there may be an issue there. I know that when you first brought this up, I was thinking about heavy metals. It's very common to see corals become pale. Instead of being bright fluorescent green, bright fluorescent orange, they suddenly become more of a dull green and dull orange, and then bleach, where they completely lose their pigments. That's a common symptom when there's a heavy metal issue. And when I say a heavy metal issue, I mean excess of a heavy metal or multiple ones, which can happen when a magnet is corroding, if a pump has a breach in the epoxy seal that protects the coil, a heater also if it's not properly sealed. So you can get copper, other metals into the water in a concentration that's not absolutely immediately lethal, but it's toxic and the corals will bleach. So those are the kinds of things that come to mind when I see these symptoms. So blastos, elegans coral, bubble corals are all perfectly fine. Soft corals also are okay. The Goniopora is shriveled. All right, what we get from this is you have a contradiction. Not all corals are affected. That's not a rare condition, not a rare situation. Also, the Goniopora being shriveled, I would refer your audience to an article that I wrote back, I think it was in 2002. So if you do a Google search for Julian Sprung, Goniopora, you'll probably turn up this article from Advanced Aquarist Online, where I reported for the first time an observation that dosing manganese would make a Goniopora that was not opening up, that was shriveled, pulling its polyps in, suddenly it expanded, and then it would gain color. If it was bleached, it would recover color. And subsequently, you know, I began to realize that it wasn't just Goniopora, that this phenomenon of bleaching and then recovery could be reproduced with practically any coral. When you see bleaching, dosing manganese is helpful. So you have here in the notes heavy metals, check pumps, power heads, frag racks, equipment that use metal or magnets, as I mentioned. And I think that you've already done that with your ICP testing. You have in the notes here that Shane, our buddy Shane, and I've already seen the ICP test. I haven't seen low strontium cause most of these symptoms. Maybe polyp bailout, a really low strontium level, I think could be associated with polyp bailout. But again, I've already seen the test results and your strontium level is not low. Nutrients being too low, that's kind of a general thought, and the result of the ICP test that you did actually did suggest, it said critically low on, I think on your phosphate level and too low on your nitrate level. And I thought that was really interesting because from my perspective, the phosphate level in your test, which was 0.02, was perfectly okay. That's natural seawater or slightly above natural seawater level. And so I wouldn't call that critically low. I would say that it's actually low for the typical aquarium, but I would say it was pretty ideal. Now, your nitrate level, I'd have to look at the reading again. I think it was 1 point something parts per million, right? Now, that would be lower than the average aquarium hobbyist, but that would be extremely high compared to natural seawater. So again, it's a bit of interpretation of whether you're low or not. And if you have a moment to chat with Charles, he can tell you whether those given values, your phosphate and nitrate levels, are within the ratios that he finds to be beneficial for Montipora corals. You might be off, that nitrate level may be a little bit too high, so it may be that, yeah, you need to raise the phosphate level to get it to the right ratio, and that may improve the conditions. I don't see how that's going to improve the polyp bailout on that euphilia. I'm really not sure what that is. That could be a pathogen, you know, some other cause. I'm really not sure. Yeah, I want to comment in general about ICP testing. I think it's really great that we've come to a point where we can accurately measure the ratios of the macro elements, the minor elements, and the trace elements, and determine whether there is some issue. What I fear, though, is that whenever we do this, we observe a problem in the aquarium first, and then we use the test to try to go, aha, it's that's it. And in fact, most of the time, the results that you get from an ICP test are not going to give you that smoking gun. They can kind of give you a clue. I have seen on many occasions an aquarium presenting with a number of different symptoms, and the ICP test comes back. I look at it and I say, boy, this is great. This water quality is perfect, you know? So, and I have seen tanks that have no issue at all. The tank looks beautiful and an ICP test shows some real problems. So you have to take it with a grain of salt and understand that you may not absolutely find the answer with those tests. And of course, tests have some error in them. They're not all precise. And if you send out your sample to different companies, you're going to get a range. They're never going to match each other. They should be close, but they're never going to match. You have to understand the range of accuracy on these things is not pinpointed. So keeping that in mind, We're looking at these results here, and bromine is a little bit low, but not significant, not that I would be worried. Strontium ever so slightly low, but it's normal, close to natural seawater. Let's see. The result points to having a low iodine level. That could be a factor in these symptoms. So I obviously following up by dosing iodine and then seeing how the corals respond to it. That's definitely something you should try. And this is the kind of benefit of doing the ICP test, where a biologically assimilated trace element, if it's critically low, then you know, okay, I should add that. I'm surprised to see such a low iodine level because, you know, as we spoke, you do feed seaweed to your fishes. So that is normally a source of iodine in our reef aquariums. So I think I would follow up with a second test to see if it comes out the same low iodine level. Sometimes the readings are wrong. That may have been an error in the ICP result. Your aluminum level is rather high, 5.69 microgram per liter. So I don't know whether that is a factor in any of these symptoms. It's something that could be tested. Typically, elevated aluminum concentrations are associated with problems with soft corals. And as you said, your soft corals are all doing fine. So, you know, I doubt that this is the cause of the problem, but it's something to check. You know, maybe you could reduce the aluminum level and see how the corals respond. How you would reduce it, you can use a metals absorber like Metasorb. That would take care of it. That's about it.
What about iron?
Ah, yes. Well, when I referred to the manganese dosing, typically you dose iron and manganese together. And yeah, iron is critical in pigment formation, so you should, thanks for the reminder, you should be dosing both the iron and manganese. And bear in mind, since both iron and manganese are assimilated rapidly and they're also oxidized rapidly, you know, presumably whatever formulation you're using is going to be chelated to help it stay in solution longer. But either way, both processes, the assimilation and oxidation, will make the iron and manganese level fall very quickly. So it's, you know, you kind of think of those two trace elements as almost being like feeding the tank food. Obviously you don't want to overdose them, but you do need to have them going in every week. It's critical. Even if you didn't need to before, it is important, especially now where you're seeing bleaching in the corals. But it's a good idea to open each pump, look inside the cavity where the impeller goes. Sometimes a crack will develop there from the heat. You know, what happens is in a saltwater aquarium where you're dosing calcium and alkalinity, some calcium carbonate will deposit in that hot space there where the impeller is, and that will make the it'll heat up, the pump will get even hotter as you have some friction there. And eventually you can get a crack. And that's where you typically get some metals will then leak through from where the epoxy was. Definitely something to check periodically, and it could be a factor. When you have a slight cut on a finger or in a fingernail and you stick your hand in the water, sometimes you'll get a little of a jolt, like an electrical, and that is often a first sign that that has happened in one of your pumps. So something to bear in mind. The magnets that hold pumps against the glass for those recirculating pumps inside Sometimes the seal on the magnet will break and leaks a little bit of heavy metals into the tank. So something to check. Your 0 iron level is kind of an indication that you're probably okay, but still, periodically you're going to want to check all of these things. You know, in some closed hoods where there might be metal in the hood and, you know, it's a humid environment, it can drip, splash. You can get some metals entering that way, or over the sump if the cabinet has metal parts. That can happen, but I don't think you have those issues. Well, I mean, Tulio Fishies makes a product that is both of those in one, iron and manganese. You can add them separately, up to you. You can take 2 separate products and mix them. There's no incompatibility, but obviously you would want to make sure that the dosage, if you've got them mixed, that the dosage would make sense for the 2 of them, that you have the single dosing, but of 2 items. No problem there. I mean, what other things would I be doing? You could try water change to reduce that aluminum level. You know, looking at the source of aluminum, maybe, you know, if you have ceramics in the filter media, that would be the likely place where that's coming from. I'm not saying that it is causing those problems, but if you wanted to check and see whether the aluminum concentration is connected to the bleaching or anything like that, it's easy enough to test. And if it makes no difference, then it's not likely to be a factor. If you see improvement, then that's something to note, and then see if you can replicate it by putting it back. Aluminum level comes up. Do you see if that initiates bleaching? I would think that by now, you know, enough people using ceramic media that connection may have been observed and reported, and I'm not sure that I've ever seen that. In the ICP results, there was something else was low, was zinc, and you should be adding zinc as well. It does get assimilated fairly rapidly. You know, I don't know what the connection is for corals, but I do know that additions of zinc to maintain natural seawater levels have been observed to be beneficial, that the corals do, yeah, they improve their expansion, their color, all of those things. So the fact that your zinc is extremely low, that would be something to correct. You know, water change alone could do that as long as the salt has a natural seawater zinc level, but it's less expensive and less work to just add a zinc supplement.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You mentioned before that I could combine the iron and the manganese together. Can I also add the zinc?
Yeah,
to it as well?
They're compatible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Because, you know, like, I think a lot of people don't have dosers laying around.
Right.
And then because you gave me the idea earlier, I thought
Yes.
it maybe, you know, like, people could benefit from it by just combining it all in
Yeah.
one, providing the fact that they have to do a calculation first. All right. Well, thank you so much, Julian.
You're very welcome.
I really appreciate your insight.
My pleasure, Richard. And I look forward to the follow-up and seeing your tank recover from these problems. I don't, at this moment, know for sure what's going on. So additional testing, the supplementing, all I could do is give you ideas of what to try. And you will see improvement and recovery with some of these things. So it's after the fact you'll be able to look back and say, okay, that's what it was. We can't do any better than that. Yeah. Thanks.
But wait, there's more!
Okay, so we were talking about ways of getting metals out of the water. I mentioned the Metasorb. And as we were packing up, it occurred to me, or actually Richard, you mentioned something about your algal turf filter. And then I was thinking, oh wow, yes, if we were there in front of your aquarium, it would have occurred to me immediately. That's a really important way of removing excess metals. Algal filters are extremely effective at that. Of course, we all know that they're effective at removing excess nitrogen and phosphate, so that is a good reason why your levels are so low. The algal filter is doing that for you. And in the same process, they pull out the iron and the manganese. So that is probably the reason why in the past you didn't really need to add iron and manganese, whereas now that you've got algal filter or algal filtration and it's effective, you're seeing an issue with your corals where you need to add more iron and manganese because the algae and the corals are competing for the same resource. It's similar, they're competing for the same nitrogen and phosphorus. So you have a hungry reef. You need to be supplying excess, or not excess, correct amount of metals, iron and manganese, and perhaps there is some extra phosphorus that you need to add to balance that slight excess of nitrate that you have. That puts a little extra spin on what I had said earlier. You ready, Richard?
Yes, sir.
I'm ready. Okay, so look, I don't want to make this interview appear to be an infomercial for Two Little Fishies. Obviously, I represent Two Little Fishies, and I'm giving you advice really about your aquarium. But since you focus the attention on trace element supplementing, I mean, I pointed that was a part of the solution. And you were asking me about can I mix the iron and manganese and the zinc. Naturally, I should mention that Two Little Fishies makes a product called Sea Elements. And in addition to the iron, the manganese, and the zinc, Sea Elements also strongly supplements iodine, which you were short of according to the ICP test. I first told you to get at least a second opinion, another test to confirm the low iodine level. I would recommend doing that because you don't want to overdose iodine. But as I said, Sea Elements has all of them in one product. So that would be something that you could be trying now to see what happens, how the corals respond. Okay? Got it.